challenge the default model, and the default model is event-based wellbeing. And I think that's to me, if I'm to be kind of more straight, I would see that's like primary school. It's what in a way we were naturally as kids, we were reactive to stuff, and then over time, we actually develop more brain function that we can actually assess things and evaluate things in a way that we didn't have the complexity to be able to do that. But unfortunately, the adult model of well-being or self-esteem, and with young people, it's still progressing in that same way, is that it's still at that primary school level of this bad thing happens, I cry. I just think it's time for us all to grow up, to be honest. And I think we need to go beyond that to have that sense of responsibility within myself. And this is not advocating a lack of compassion for people that are struggling. No way. I think that's really important. But I'm talking about our own personal accountability, is to be able to shift from this event-based wellbeing model to an inner wellbeing model. But I have to say that there's also a process for that. And as I said, when we're talking about going from unhealthy sense of self to healthy sense of self, that's that accountability bit. But to go from the healthy sense of self to no sense of self does require one step, and that is, in mindfulness they talk about this ability to be able to step back from our thoughts, feelings and sensations, and be able to see them as what in mindfulness they call them passing mental events, rather than me or the truth. So it might be like, oh, I'm no good at this. It's like, I either believe that and am identified with that thought. Well, mindfulness says, could you just step back and perhaps even use this phrase, I am having the thought that ... I'm no good at this stuff. And as soon as you get that separation point, you go, wow, mind, you've just created that really not so great belief that's created these not so great feelings and now physical sensations if it's a strong one. So that's, I think, the first step, is to be able to challenge the model. And then the second step would be, with mindfulness, once you've stepped back, is then, if you can, literally inquire, I'm looking at those thoughts now, which is great. I'm not governed or driven by those thoughts. So there's a lot of freedom in that place, yeah? But then the next step could be then to also then turn attention, instead of just looking at those thoughts, turn attention back on where the viewer or the witness, as they call it, is looking from. In other words, we've got awareness on these thoughts, but where is that awareness coming from? Who's generating that awareness? And when we turn our awareness back onto the source of itself, or what sometimes people would call turning awareness back onto awareness, what's there? Well, neuroscience seems to have said, well, there's nothing there. There's a sense of self that is being collected and voluntarily, or involuntarily actually, created. But when the brain isn't able to do that, isn't able to function that way, what's left? Well, there's just this space, this natural sense of self. Well, if you could call it that, this naturalness, this awareness that's just here and present, and it's totally aware. It's aware of thoughts and da-da. But that's the third place, the no self, no ego, if you like, place. And I would encourage people to explore that, because when you get to that, now we're talking resilience on steroids, because there's nothing that can touch that. When there's this free open place, and the mind also has become quite still, and someone says something to you and throws in yada yada, it's like touch nothing. And to me, this is the place I think we need to go to. A bit like the aeroplane metaphor of put your own oxygen mask on first. I think step one is to experience this ourselves, and to then from that place be able to assist others to do that. I think the lovely thing about compassion, in a way, is that it becomes, when our box is full, when we feel okay in ourselves, a few things happen that are quite possibly unexpected. One is there's no need to get something from other people to feel good, because we're already feeling good. Yes, there's a natural equanimity already present. The second thing that arises when you're already feeling fine now is a natural compassion, a natural interest in, and you're not? Okay, hey, would you like that? And I think this is the lovely thing about this from a community level, is that when we are sorted, we naturally, I don't know, it just seems to be that we want to help sort others, because it's like, how can I can feel great, but how can I still feel great, but how can I feel great if you're not? It's like, what can we do? And I think this is where spontaneous altruism occurs, when we're full or good, then we just want to help the others, which is automatic community. Yeah, it's not policy statement community and newsletter council community that, this is connection community, if you like, genuineness. What is that phrase, but the grace of God, there go I. It's like, I could have been like that, and I feel great, so what can I do? It's important to be practical when I feel that I might be struggling beyond my current skill level. To do the right thing, in a sense, by ourselves. It's what they call self-compassion or self-nurturance. Is, could I benefit from some help here? So I think that's still accountable. It's not like you're being needy in a sense. I think it's just almost like realistic. Like if a little bit like there's not much money in the account. Okay, I need to take some action. So I think that's really important. And then I would say that once that's done in whatever form, in other words, if it's solved by either getting the team to help, the community, whether it's this professional or this friend or mentor, I think that's relevant if we can't source it ourselves. Then the next step, I would say, is that when we are back on track, is to then be that for others. And I think that's the second half to it. It's what I call it, kind of almost like the combination of what I call truth and love. The truth is interested in getting this thing right, sorting this, but then somehow not just for me, which is the love bit. It's like, and I want all to be well. So sort myself and then potentially be available for others. I'm a big advocate of this shift from the event-based wellbeing to inner wellbeing model, and I think it's a conversation that could be had at a governmental level, and I think it can affect policy. I think, for example, even when I think about policy in regards to, say, integrating quality of life findings, the fact that those external events make up such a small percentage of our well-being. I think often funding, even like something like town planning, they've tried to integrate quality of life research into that. Like by creating a park there or creating a centre there, this will enable people to be able to have more access to things that will then give them some quality experiences, support their connections, and so on, rather than purely just a design model that's based upon economic factors. So I think, in other words, quality of life research can be applied across many different arenas. And I think the well-being research now can apply specifically to the mental health conversation that are being had. And so I feel the great thing about the inner well-being model or paradigm is that it's from a governmental point of view, it's a non-recurrent funding model in that when we get more sorted, we don't cost as much. If we want to purely look at it as an economic unit, we are more sorted and we're not continually draining and pulling from the system because we're struggling. So I think there's a lot of economic advantage actually to exploring how to move this from this to a more mature model, from this more event-based to inner well-being one. And that's my specialisation, I guess, is the premise or foundation of happiness, and it being an internally derived phenomenon, if you like. And I think that's attainable for us. So I'm a big advocate. I'm also advocating that third step, to be able to go past just a healthy sense of self, to even transcend that altogether. And for that, you also need to have an experience of it. So when we talk about the mindfulness, the stepping back, it is when I get to step back and observe my thoughts, feelings, sensations as just passing mental events, I get some separation from it, and I get to see in some ways that I'm responsible for all of it. I can choose which thought I have. I mean, sometimes they're quite involuntary, it's true. But I can also consciously try and overturn whatever thought I want. Or, as mindfulness does, it's a little bit more of a lazy approach, you could argue, it's not interested in overturning beliefs that we've created in the first place. It's just more interested in seeing that they are created. And so why take a belief, a thought I've created, seriously? Because I created the darn thing in the first place. So it's the ability to observe all of that, I think is where we need to go. But the last step, I think, though, it's missed in a lot of the mindfulness work, and certainly in the mental health discussions, not present at all, is this next step of not just stepping back and observing thought, feeling, sensation, but to observe the awareness that it comes from, and to discover what that experience is, to discover my nature, if you like, that which I actually am. So that's a very silent and beautiful way of being. And I think that's the next conversation. I think step one would be to do the mindfulness approach, which is to step back and just see what beliefs have I gathered about myself, or, because sometimes we inherit beliefs from family, friends, and whatever else, which don't serve us. So I would encourage people to be able to just almost like do an audit. These are my beliefs about where I get my value, and can I defend them? Is that something which is, defensible? And because the beliefs are voluntary, we have different ones. Do those serve me? So I would do that, and then potentially in stepping back, you get a chance to change them or just chuck them out. And then I would encourage people to be able to have that intangible reference point versus this event-based reference point. I think that's probably the main advice as step one. And then step two, of course, is to go to that, to allow you have a chance to be able to go to that more silent place beyond it, which takes you from unhealthy sense of self to healthy sense of self to no self. And I think that last place is the peaceful place. And when you're there, no problems. I think that's the work.